You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound, a dimension of sight, and a dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of both things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone. Now, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more iconic opening sequence in the history of fictional media. Now, I remember as a child hearing those words. It would fill me with both excitement and dread as I would watch Twilight Zone marathons for both Independence Day and New Year's. Now, growing up, the original Twilight Zone held a fascination for me that I simply could not duplicate in any other film or series that my young eyes pored over. Now, as a millennial, I was born some 20 years after this groundbreaking television show had been canceled, but it was the Twilight Zone that holds that special kind of uniqueness that makes it both timeless and relatable. It's stories of ordinary people confronted with extraordinary situations of both horror and fantasy that speaks directly to the human psyche. It has the power to fill you with fear, but also teach you those moral truths that are as relevant today as they were in the 1960s. But what seems to get lost on many people is the man behind the Twilight Zone. The mild-mannered and analytical creative genius that became one of my personal heroes in the realm of science fiction and fantasy. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the life and times of Rod Serling.
Christmas Day, 1924, and one Rodman Edward Serling was born on the east side of Syracuse, New York. Born to Esther and Samuel Lawrence, Rod is the youngest of two sons to a hard-working Jewish-American family at the start of the Roaring Twenties. Esther was the quintessential homemaker, while Samuel owned a business as a grocer. From the very onset, young Rod displayed aptitude as a performer and storyteller. After the family had moved to Binghamton, Samuel sought to encourage both his boys in the areas they were most interested in. For Rod's older brother Robert, it is a love and fascination of airplanes, and for Rod, it was the art of storytelling. It was even said that Samuel built a little stage in the basement so that his son could put on little plays. Throughout his childhood, Rod had an insatiable appetite for adventure and pulp magazines. He showed a fondness for the works of Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, and Edgar Allan Poe. All throughout his teenage years, he remained a good student and a popular classmate amongst his peers. It was during the end of his time in high school that he developed a fondness for radio. Rod had high hopes of getting into a good college to pursue his love of radio and acting. However, the outbreak of World War II postponed those plans. Even though his plans were momentarily stifled, Rod was eager to join the war effort, and in the summer of 1943, he enlisted at Camp Toccoa near Georgia. Rod served in the 511th Parachute Infantry Regiment in the 11th Airborne Division. During his time in the military, Rod earned a bevy of awards, decorations, and ribbons. These included a Combat Infantry Badge, a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, a World War II Victory Medal, an American Campaign Medal, and many, many more. Needless to say, Rod Serling was a respected and highly decorated armed forces veteran. After the war, Serling used his GI Bill to enroll in Antioch College near Yellow Springs, Ohio. While directing a number of radio broadcasting plays, he met Carolyn Louise Kramer. Rod had a bit of a reputation for being quite the ladies' man on campus, which made Carol both wary and irresistibly attracted to Rod. The two struck up a whirlwind romance and were married just a short while later. The happy union produced two daughters, Jody and Anne. To earn extra money for his burgeoning family, Rod further explored his daredevil streak by testing parachutes as a part-time military contractor. He earned anywhere from $50 to $1,000 per successful test. At the age of only 35, Rod was a war hero, husband, father, and daredevil parachuter. Never let it be said that Rod Serling was not a man's man. However, beyond his family, Rod had yet to achieve his most notable success: television icon and pioneering storyteller. After cutting his teeth in radio and winning some minor accolades, Rod was feeling disillusioned with the medium. He felt deep down that radio just wasn't letting him live up to his full potential. After bouncing around for a while, Serling landed a gig as a freelance writer for WKRC television. Rod would spend literally night and day writing numerous scripts for television series and pilots, amassing over 40 rejection slips in just a few short years working for WKRC. Frustrated and near his breaking point, Rod was convinced by an agent to up and move his family to New York, where the television market was booming. Rod secured a writing assignment for a weekly anthology series named Craft Television Theatre. Rod had submitted an episode named Patterns, which focused on the power struggle between an aging TV executive and a young upcoming sharpshooter looking to make a name for himself. It was the break Rod had been waiting for. Patterns would receive rave reviews and prove to be one of the highlights of the entire Craft Theatre series, being hailed as a creative triumph. The episode was a ratings juggernaut for the studio, and suddenly Rod Serling was the name on everyone's lips. Shortly after his Patterns success, Serling wrote the critically acclaimed Requiem for a Heavyweight for the Playhouse 90 Outlet series, which garnered him even more acclaim. This cascade of success gave Rod the creative freedom and pull within the studio system and prompted him to make the all-important move to Los Angeles. It was here where Rod made his move, having come up with the general premise for a weekly supernatural and science fiction anthology he called The Twilight Zone. After seeing the success that Rod had garnered with Patterns and Requiem for a Heavyweight, CBS commissioned The Twilight Zone, and on October 2, 1959, one of the most seminal and groundbreaking achievements in television history, aired with the episode entitled Where is Everybody? Where Is Everybody tell the story of Air Force Captain Michael Ferris, who finds himself wandering down a desolate dirt road headed into an eerily quiet town just ahead. Captain Ferris is suffering from severe amnesia and has no idea how he ended up in his current predicament. The town where Ferris ends up is nightmarishly devoid of any human life, yet the town itself is kept up to pristine working order. There is food cooking on a countertop in one of the diners, a movie is playing in a local theatre, and Ferris swears he's being watched by someone or something, despite the fact that there isn't a soul around. When Captain Ferris finally discovers the truth about the abandoned town, it's a shocker the audience simply doesn't see coming. The Twilight Zone was nothing less than a massive hit for CBS. The ratings were off the charts for the network. The groundbreaking television show lasted for a total of 5 seasons, from 1959 to 1964, with 156 episodes in its impressive roster. Throughout the ensuing years, The Twilight Zone achieved status as a staple in the zeitgeist of American pop culture. It is named as 26th of the 50 greatest television shows of all time by Variety magazine and would inspire and terrify generations of filmmakers and fascinate fans of sci-fi and horror for over 60 years and counting. The Twilight Zone was unlike anything ever made before or since. It was storytelling at its most compelling and spoke to the sheer creative genius of Rod Serling. Five years after the success and subsequent cancellation of The Twilight Zone, Rod Serling sought to continue his foray into the dark and mysterious world of anthology with the creation of Night Gallery. Much as he did on The Twilight Zone, Serling served as the main host for the show. Night Gallery focused much more on horror and the psychological macabre than its predecessor. Although Night Gallery lasted for 3 seasons, it failed to capture the same kind of wonder and fascination The Twilight Zone did, and as a result, suffered in the ratings. Rod had also lamented that he had much less creative control over the scripts as he had with The Twilight Zone, and often clashed with the studios over the ultimate direction Night Gallery was to take. It was ultimately cancelled in the spring of 1973 to lackluster fanfare. After Night Gallery, Rod kept himself busy with a subsequent return to radio, all the while raising his 2 daughters. He also toured around the country speaking at a variety of film school engagements. But the spectre that hung over his life and daily activity was his love affair with his cigarettes. Serling was known far and wide as a chain smoker, with some anecdotes telling of him smoking some 3 or 4 packs a day. In the spring of 1975, he suffered 2 back-to-back heart attacks that caused doctors to consider open heart surgery. During the procedure, Rod suffered yet another heart attack, and on June 28, 1975, the living legend that was Rod Serling died. The world had lost a true icon of modern-day television. He was only 50 years old.
Now, for myself, I simply can't overstate the impact that Rod Serling had on my life. The first Twilight Zone episode I ever saw, I was about 6 years old, and I'll never forget it. It was the episode called Eye of the Beholder, and the mix of terror and fascination that took hold of my young mind was indescribable. Much like my love of the stories of H.P. Lovecraft, the Twilight Zone took hold of me and never once let go. So, while talking about the life of the man that created a show that had such a tremendous effect on me, I would be completely remiss not to count down my 5 favorite episodes of the original Twilight Zone for your viewing pleasure, of course. Now, as mentioned before, the pilot episode of The Twilight Zone was indeed something special. As number 5 on my list, Where Is Everybody introduces the viewer to an eerie and fascinating mystery right from the start. We travel with Captain Ferris as he makes his way through this unnerving and frightening abandoned town, wondering just who is watching him from the shadows, if anyone at all. The episode invokes feelings of fear, paranoia, and oddly enough, claustrophobia. Now, what is the secret behind this weird town and its missing inhabitants? Living Doll is arguably the original template for Child's Play. Talkie Tina is an obvious predecessor for Chucky. Now, the episode sets a spine-chilling and ominous atmosphere as we see the character of Eric Strader slowly come to the horrifying realization that his stepdaughter's doll is indeed alive and is set upon his eventual murder. When Eric receives the phone call from Talkie Tina after he swore he had gotten rid of her is what nightmares are truly made of. Mickey Rooney plays Grady, a washed-up horse jockey who is way past his prime days of glory. Stuck in a dingy apartment awaiting an important phone call, Grady suddenly starts up an ominous conversation with a voice inside his head that claims to be his alter subconscious. Over the course of the episode, Grady and the disembodied voice have quite the heated exchange, which results in the out-of-work jockey to confront an ironic nightmare of his own making. Mickey Rooney's performance is nothing less than stellar, and the episode brings a whole new meaning to the phrase, one-man show. Jackie Rhodes is a petty crook that is now forced to hole up in a cheap motel room to await orders for his next job. After being informed that his next assignment is to assassinate a local store owner, Jackie is beside himself. He's never killed anyone before, and he doesn't know if he can bring himself to pull the trigger. However, in his contemplation for the terrible job, Jackie is even more horrified to see that his reflection in the mirror has now taken on a life of its own. It is revealed that this is Jackie's alter ego, and it wants to now take total control of his body in order to reverse the disastrous path that Jackie's life has now taken. In another marvelous demonstration of a one-man show, the episode proves that a man arguing with his mirror image can carry just as much tension, awe, and development as an entire ensemble cast of characters. Jerry Etherson is described as a voice thrower par excellence who suffers from alcoholism and an even darker affliction. Namely, that his ventriloquist dummy named Willie is not a dummy at all, but a malevolent spirit who seeks to replace Jerry and take over. The episode delivers an eerie and frightening backdrop as we see Jerry engaged in a desperate battle of wills with his demonic dummy. Willie taunts, harasses, and outright tries to demoralize Jerry in order to break him and drive him utterly insane, all simply because he wants to be the boss in this relationship. I remember as a child, this episode literally left an indelible scar on my psyche, and despite this, has earned my love and adoration as the top spot for my all-time favorite Twilight Zone episode.
In the first place, what would you do without me? Well, for one thing, I could be a better ventriloquist.
The sheer genius that pervaded the mind of Rod Serling can scarcely be described. The Twilight Zone reached a cultural status that few works of television fiction will ever attain. To put it in the words of a current film guru, they just don't tell stories like this anymore. And I couldn't agree more with him on that. Rest in peace, Rod. Your legacy will continue to shine for many more generations to come. More than anyone else, I think that it was you that taught me to question everything and trust no one. Until next time, everyone.